Hi, I'm Melanie, and this is Artifact and Landmark. This episode is about Samuel McKee, who was a founder of a glassworks on the south side of Pittsburgh with his brothers Thomas and James. He was also involved in other businesses that would support the growth of the region of Pittsburgh and specifically of Birmingham. So Samuel was born on March 29th, 1808 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania to Daniel McKee and Mary Stewart, but soon after his father's death, his mother Mary moves the family to Pittsburgh, and then they relocate to the other side of the Monongahela to Birmingham, now the south side of Pittsburgh. Birmingham was established in about 1811 by Dr. Nathaniel Bedford, and it took on the name of Southside in about 1872 when it was annexed into Pittsburgh. So when Samuel arrived in Pittsburgh with his family, he would have been only about 2 years old, and we're not sure when he moved to Birmingham. So he was also the youngest of 5 brothers, and Daniel was the eldest. Then there was John, then Thomas, and finally James, with Samuel being the youngest. In 1829, Samuel McKee marries Mary Imson, who is born in 1810. She is the daughter of a leading glass manufacturer named Charles Imson, and he was one of the founders of the Birmingham Glass Works. So this union, this marriage, connects Samuel to 2 of the most important figures of glass of his day. So one would be Christian Imson, son of Charles Imson and brother to his wife Mary, and then Frederick Lorenz, who is married to another of the daughters of Charles Imson. We believe that Samuel learned his trade at the Birmingham Glassworks or a glassworks in Birmingham. And it isn't surprising that in 1837, with his family glass connections, that Samuel, about 28 years old, along with brothers James and Thomas, established S. McKee & Co. It's also known as the Pennsylvania Glass Works. They at first produced hollowware and window glass. We know by the mid-1850s, the works are advertising the production of bottles, jars, and insulators. Since the works were in Birmingham and the offices were in the borough of Pittsburgh, we aren't sure where Samuel would have spent most of his time. His works in Birmingham would have been located on the block of Denman, now 12th Street, and Washington, now Sarah Streets. His offices in the borough of Pittsburgh would first be on Wood near Virgin Alley, which is now Oliver Avenue. Then 2nd Street, which is now Boulevard of the Allies, between Wood and Market, and finally at 62 and 63 Water Street, now Fort Pitt Boulevard. And he will live on the south side of Pittsburgh for most of his life. He does move to Oakland to the B.A. Feinstock estate in about 1862. Samuel became involved in government, invested in utilities, bridges, banking, and insurance companies. So let's go over some key events. So in the 1830s, what he really does is establish his works, and he gets involved in city politics. So we know he establishes his works in 1837 with his 2 brothers, Tom and James. In 1839, we see him as president of the Birmingham Town Council and his brother Thomas as treasurer of the town of Birmingham. Now moving into the 1840s, we see more politics and a few family members pass away. In 1841, we see Samuel as Burgess and his brother Daniel as council member of Birmingham. Samuel's mother, Mary, the matriarch, passes in 1841 at the age of 66. In 1843, he also enters the dry goods business with, it seems, the same partners. It's the same company name. That year, we also see him giving a speech to the Birmingham Literary Institute. In 1844, we see his brother Daniel pass after a long illness, and he's only about 51 years old. The Harris Directory for that year, 1844, we see Samuel as director and president and his brother Thomas as director of the Birmingham Public Schools, which reports having 280 students. We have this map from the 1850s, which highlight a few of the public schools at that time. In 1850, there will also be a new public school that will open. We also see in the directory of 1844 that Samuel McKee is captain of the military company for Birmingham, and he will at times throughout his life be called captain. Moving on to the 1850s, we now see him moving into county politics and investing in the bridges, railroads, some banks, and more. In 1851, he becomes a member of the Young Men's Mercantile Library and Mechanics Institute. He becomes a committee member for the Birmingham Bridge. In 1852, he's elected to the Pittsburgh and Steubenville Railroad Committee. In that same year, at the age of 44, he throws his hat in the ring for becoming Birmingham's representative as part of the Allegheny elections, county elections, but he loses to George E. Appleton. In 1853, he is elected as manager of the Birmingham Bridge Company. In 1853, we see Samuel elected as director of the Merchants and Mechanics Bank, along with his brother-in-law, Christian Imson. Samuel is elected to president of the Birmingham and Brownsville Plank Road Company. In 1857, Thomas, his brother, effectively retires from the firm. And we know that his sons, Frederick and James, are busy building their own glass, F and J McKee, which will eventually become McKee Glass, that operated out of Jeannette into the 1980s. In 1858, Samuel is on the ballot again, this time on the county assembly ballot, and was defeated by John P. Penny. Now moving into the 1860s, we see more county politics, and of course we see the Civil War. We see some family members passing, and we see him actually getting fairly severely injured. He relocates his warehouse during this period, and he moves into his new estate. So in 1860, we have a first tragedy. His daughter Wilhelmina McKee, who's the wife of William F. Van Kirk, dies at 28, about a week after the birth of her son William. According to this article, McKee was traveling and he was surrounded by a number of his friends, laughing heartily at a story one of them was relating, at the same time leisurely opening up the dispatch. A glance at it told him the mournful truth, and in an instant he burst into tears and was borne helpless into his stateroom. The sudden transition from joy to sorrow has completely prostrated him. His friends sympathized deeply with him and his bereavement. Now, Wilhelmina would have had 3 children at this point, so she definitely had been married for a bit longer than what this article says. But perhaps some of this article is true. And we can only imagine Samuel McKee being very distraught by the death of his child. In 1861, we see Samuel's namesake, Samuel A. McKee, enlist in the Union Army. That same year, both his son-in-law, Robert Wallace, and his son, William F. McKee, join the firm. In 1863, we see regional manufacturers, including S. McKee & Co., to be called upon to build 37 forts in Pittsburgh in response to the possible invasion of the Confederate Army. And S. McKee & Co. will be responsible for the fort at the top of Mount Washington. So he also decides around this time to move his warehouses from 2nd Street to 62 Water Street. And we also see him move to a new home in what is now Oakland. It's the former estate of B.A. Fainstock, which we think he buys after his death. And this property, this estate, will eventually become McKee Place. Now, 1864 was really a tremendously horrible year for Samuel. In early 1864, his brother James passes. Around that same time, his son Samuel McKee is killed in the Civil War. He's only 22 years old when he's killed in action. A few months after his son dies, his brother Thomas also passes. And so that would have been in June of that year of 1864. So it's almost no surprise that in July of 1864, Samuel seriously injures himself. He's climbing aboard one of the passenger streetcars, and while he's getting on the streetcar, a horse has a sudden start. I don't know if it got spooked, but it starts going forward, and the rail car, of course, passes over him. He's thrown to the ground. His arm is broken, his leg is broken, and he does suffer some internal injuries. We see, of course, that he does recover because he goes on in his business, and he would have been about 56 years old when all of these events happened. So we see Samuel moving on with his life in 1865. He's donating to the Soldiers' Orphans Fund. We see him elected to an insurance company called the Artisan Insurance Company. His son Daniel will actually also be associated with this company. In 1866, we see articles about the Allegheny Cemetery. They're covering how much people are paying for their monuments. It shows Samuel McKee's monument cost around $2,500. In 1866, we see Samuel throwing his hat in the ring again for county assembly, and unfortunately he's defeated again. In 1867, we see Samuel being appointed as director of the Union Pacific Railroad. And then that same year, unfortunately, we also see the partnership between Samuel, his son William, and his son-in-law Robert dissolve. In 1868, they put up their warehouse at 63 Water Street for rent. And the next year, and in 1869, his former partner and son-in-law, Robert Wallace, passes. So in the 1870s, we see Mrs. McKee, Samuel McKee, get involved herself in the Soldiers' Monument, Allegheny Soldiers' Monument. We see additional family members passing, and we see the passing of Samuel McKee. So in about 1865, the citizens of Allegheny County were really calling for a soldiers' monument. And there were many false starts, and it took Mrs. McKee and other women forming the Ladies Monument Association to make the difference. And then in 1871, we see the dedication of the Soldiers' Monument. Now, at first, it will be on Seminary Hill or Monument Hill, and it would move in 1931 and also go through a redesign. And it is now sitting in West Park on the north side. In 1873, William F. McKee, so this would be Samuel McKee's son and his former partner, also passes. In 1876, we see the patriarch Samuel McKee passing at the age of 68. So if you're curious what happens to the heirs, meaning Christian McKee, Daniel McKee, and his son-in-law A.C. Dravo, I'll quickly run through some points about their lives. So in 1877, after the death of Samuel, we see a new partnership. The partnership will be between these three, Daniel McKee, Christian, and son-in-law A.C. Dravo. And in 1881, we see matriarch Mary also die. So in the coming decades, we see the family selling many of the properties of Samuel McKee, but we can still see two landmarks, or at least two areas in Pittsburgh that are closely related and that you can go visit today and know that Samuel McKee and his legacy and the legacy of S. McKee & Co., the glass company, are still alive and well. So the first is Armstrong Field. It's a park on the south side of Pittsburgh at the old location of the works, so it would be on 12th, between 12th and 13th, and flanked by Sarah. So the second is the estate of Samuel McKee, which becomes McKee Place. So let's start with McKee Place. So McKee Place its official life begins in about 1892 when the city approves the plans. If you are interested in seeing old maps of the McKee residence along with the development timeline, we have a short video and available for you to watch now. So going to Armstrong Field. Armstrong Field began as a park in 1917. And then it evolved into the park it is today. And we have a few images we can share to show the evolution of the park. So let's get to the heirs and their stories. So Christian Imson McKee. So he's born in 1855 and he dies in 1903 at the age of 48. He's the youngest child of Samuel McKee. He marries Anne R. Patrick in 1885, and she is the eldest daughter of William Wallace, or W. Patrick, of R. Patrick & Co., who are bankers. Contrary what you might expect to see of a wedding of that day, the newspaper reports a few interesting facts, like the ladies were all dressed in white. The song was Mendelssohn's Wedding March, and the reception was at the bride's parents' house at 226 Ridge Avenue in Allegheny City, which is now called the north side of Pittsburgh. The marriage did not produce any children, so he didn't seem to follow what other businessmen were doing in the day. He really didn't join any boards, but there is one particular event in his life that must have greatly affected him, and this was the Great Flood of Johnstown. So the flood occurred Friday, May 31st, 1889, and it was due to the failure of the South Fork Dam, which there had been warnings about. A few days before, his friend John A. Little from Sewickley was leaving for a trip to Johnstown. He asked Christian to promise that if anything happened to him, that he would take care of his wife and children. So it must have just been a conversation in passing, a reassuring conversation between friends. But unfortunately, John did perish in this flood, and it was a flood that took many lives. So Christian did raise money to build a house in Sewickley for the family, and he had some money left over to put in trust, and he did find employment for some of the children. So Christian actually dies at the very young age of 48 in 1903. He leaves behind his wife, who dies in 1934. So now let's talk about the next brother, Daniel McKee. So he was born in 1847, and he will die in 1913 at the age of 66. At his death, he's the last remaining son of Samuel and Mary McKee. He would never marry. He would associate himself with many businesses, some of which were businesses that his family had long been associated with, including the First National Bank of Birmingham. His cousin, also H. Seller McKee, would also serve on that board. He also becomes a manager of the Monongahela Water Company and director of the Artisans Insurance Company, which his father Samuel also served on. So although the family do try to keep the business running and do make a good go of it, in 1904, Daniel McKee files for bankruptcy on behalf of S. McKee & Co. So longtime employees actually raised money to save the business, and they reorganized with Daniel as the manager. Unfortunately, this wasn't a success, and in 1908, the board decides to sell the plant, and Daniel will spend his final years winding down the business. After Daniel's death, there is an article in the December 16, 1913 issue of the National Glass Budget that really highlights his character and gives us some fun facts. Daniel McKee, who for 40-odd years was identified with the window glass industry of Pittsburgh, is dead. His earthly career having been brought to a close last Tuesday evening at his home at 3500 Forbes Street, Oakland. Mr. McKee was 66 years of age, and if he had an enemy in the world, we don't know where he could be found. Always quiet and unassuming, he went about his business in such a manner as to command the respect and confidence of those with whom he came in contact. For more than 30 years, the late John Fetter and Daniel Winter Sr. were bosom companions at the McKee factory on South Side. All were about the same age and as attentive to their duties as clockwork. McKee and Fetter in the business office and Winters in the factory, one of the best blowers who ever occupied an American footbench. When Mr. Winters died about a year ago, Danny McKee was one of the saddest men at the funeral, and at that time it was remarked by those who'd followed the remains of Winters to his last resting place that McKee would not long survive him, that the ravages of disease having materially shaken his former rugged physique. So Daniel McKee was the last man standing of all the family members who were partners of the McKee Glassworks. but it's comforting to see that he was so well respected. Now, A.C. Dravo. So A.C. Dravo is our final subject of this video. In 1871, A.C. Dravo becomes part of the McKee family when he marries Phoebe McKee. So she was born in 1844 and he was born in 1842. He was the son of Michael Dravo, who was a successful coal merchant. He graduated from Western University of Pennsylvania, which is now University of Pittsburgh. He was also a member of the Knights of Templar. So he would be part of the family business as McKee & Co. until about 1890. That same year, his father dies. He will remain active in business and dies in 1918. His wife would die. His wife Phoebe would die in 1928. A.C. Dravo will become attached to the banks, rails, insurance, and gas companies. Some of the companies he was associated with includes the Third National Bank of Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Bank of Savings, City Insurance Company. He becomes trustee of the Pittsburgh Gas Company, director of Chartier's Valley Gas Company, and the Hazelwood Oil Company. As with other McKees, he runs into some bother when it comes to his finances. He ends up declaring bankruptcy in 1900 with $285,000 in debt and $175,000 in assets. We also see him selling off many plots of the McKee plan over the next decade. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this overview of Samuel McKee and his heirs. They're some of the earliest glass manufacturers of Pittsburgh. You can find out more about the business as McKee & Co. in another video. If you want to learn more about McKee Place, we have a quick video about that. And if you just want to be a little more attached to the history of Pittsburgh, you can visit Armstrong Field, where the S. McKee plant used to be. Of course, you can wander down McKee Place, and you can always collect some of the glass that's still widely found online and at auctions, as well as, bottle shows throughout the country, especially those Hofstadter bitter bottles. And then, of course, their fruit jars and their whiskey flats are a little harder to find, and the really old flasks from the early days are definitely the most scarce. And it's a joy to see them. If you ever want to see one of those flasks, it is on display at the Heinz Museum in Pittsburgh.